Legal Cheek virtual student event in partnership with BPP University Law School. I'm Erin Williams, a Senior Events Coordinator here at Legal Cheek, and I'm thrilled to introduce this afternoon's session, which is the final in a series of SQE-themed virtual events that we are running in partnership with BPP, which explore everything to do with the SQE. So far in the series, we have discussed the syllabus, the assessments, MCQs, as well as provided SQE 1 and 2 taster workshops and much more, and you can find the recordings to these sessions on our website. We have also curated a list of SQE FAQs from students, which can be found on our SQE FAQs page, and my colleague will post a link to this page in the chat in just a moment. Today's session will be led by BPP's Head of Outreach and Student Recruitment, Johnny Hurst, as well as BPP's Head of Law, Hilary Chadwick. They are both joined by Farouk, Maria, and Rebecca, our panel of current SQE students who will be sharing their insights into the SQE. Just before I hand over to Johnny and Hilary, I would just like to do a quick bit of housekeeping. So during today's discussion, you can put any questions you have for the speakers in the chat, and you can find that on the right-hand side of your screen. Please do make sure your chat is set to stage as opposed to event so that we can see all of your messages coming through. Today's panel discussion will be running from 4 p.m. until just after 5 p.m., after which there will be virtual networking with the BPP University Law School team. So please don't worry if we don't get around to answering your questions during the panel discussion, because there will be ample opportunity to ask all of your questions during the virtual networking. And I will pop back up on screen to direct you across to the expo for the networking at that point. So on that note, I'm going to hand over to Johnny and Hilary for this afternoon's session.
Because we believe that the SQE is a very complex series of exams, and the choices that candidates have to make along the way are quite difficult, as well as doing the studies as well. So we believe in trying to give you the best information you can for the whole of your journey. So without further ado, let me introduce myself first of all. I'm Johnny Hurst, the Head of Outreach at BPP. I used to be a partner in a city law firm back in the day, specialising in commercial property. I'll ask each of our speakers in turn to introduce themselves very briefly, and in the case of the students, if you could just let us know where you are in your SQE journey. But starting off, first of all, with Hilary.
Hi everybody, good afternoon and welcome to this event. I'm Hilary Chadwick and I'm Head of Law at BPP Centre in Waterloo, which is predominantly where we do the law conversion course for those of you that are studying in London. By way of background, I've been in professional legal education for almost 30 years now, so it's very interesting to be able to chat to you about SQE, and now that we've had it for a few years now.
Excellent, thank you. Maria, tell us a little bit about where you are in your SQE journey.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Maria. I did my SQE 1 in January and sat SQE 2 in May. Currently waiting for my results, and I look forward to speaking to everyone.
Fabulous. So you passed SQE 1, you're waiting for your SQE 2 results, I think, aren't you?
Yes, exactly.
Fingers crossed, fingers crossed. Rebecca?
Hi everyone, I hope you can hear me well.
That's fine.
My name is Rebecca and I as well sat the SQE 1 in January and passed. However, I deferred the SQE 2 to October because I was looking out for training contracts and also because I'm currently working at a high street law firm. That's the reason, yeah.
Good stuff. So slightly different decision on the journey, and we'll probably explore that a little bit as well. And Farouk, tell us where you are in your journey.
So hi everyone, my name is Farouk. I'm a student on the LLM SQE 1 and 2 course at BPP Law School. I've passed the SQE 1 and I'm just waiting for my SQE 2 results as well, same as Maria. And I'm also a future trainee solicitor at a city law firm in London.
Fantastic, and congratulations on securing your training contract. Right, what we're going to do first, because I know a number of people when they come to these sessions have different understandings and depths of knowledge of the SQE. Some people, this may be your first SQE session that you've ever attended. So we always, at the beginning of these sessions, just give you a bit of an overview of what the SQE journey looks like. And for that, I'm just going to be guided by Hilary, who will take us through some slides that many will have seen before, because we usually show them at the beginning of an event like this. And then we'll get on to looking at which subjects candidates find the hardest, asking the three students in front of us. But we're also going to be looking at the data that the SRA publishes and sees, and see what the data tells us in terms of what students are finding. So we get the anecdotal feedback from our three students, we'll get the data, and also Hilary's perspective as someone who teaches on the SQE like I do. So first of all, Hilary, just take us through the SQE pathway to qualification, if you could do.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Johnny. So the starting point is that you need a degree or equivalent qualification. That doesn't have to be a law degree. I'm sure we're going to talk about the usefulness of having a law degree, nor do you need a law conversion course either. So as far as the SRA are concerned, the regulators are concerned, the starting point is that you have a degree or equivalent qualification. You there are various elements, various sections of this pie, as it were. So one of the pies, one of the quarters of the pie says SQE1 and SQE2, and you can do those at any stage in the journey. SQE2 has to follow SQE1 because you can't sit the SQE2 exams unless you have passed SQE1. And we know that all the students on this on our panel today have passed SQE1. The next part of the pie, the next quarter of the pie, refers to qualifying work experience, and that's 2 years of qualifying work experience, which can be done in up to 4 different places, but it has to be 2 years in total. I think we'll unpack that a little bit more. And then the final slice of the pie is the satisfactory character and suitability test. And the reason that we depict it in a pie in that circle is actually you can do the qualifying work experience before you do SQE1 and 2. You can do the qualifying work experience between SQE1 and SQE2. So there is, it isn't a linear journey, unlike the old regime of the legal practice course. It's now far more, there's far more options. And if we've already heard from Rebecca that she's deferred her SQE2 exams till later on in the year. So it's very much a journey that you can choose how you wish to, how you wish to develop and reach that stage of the not easy to say, satisfactory character and suitability test.
Yeah, and that's getting at things like whether or not you've got a criminal record, or maybe there's been some academic misconduct along the way that the SRA may be aware of that may be put into question. But yeah, if you've got a clean record, there's nothing to be worried about there.
No, absolutely.
So, folks, was there anything else you wanted to add to that, Hilary? Sorry, I interjected there.
No, not at all. No, I don't think so. So I think, the main message is that it isn't necessarily a linear journey, that there are options when you do the various slices of the pie.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, although the SRA say a non-law graduate could just go straight onto an SQE course, our policy at BPP is to require students to complete a full conversion course to get you on a level playing field with a law graduate. And only then do we believe that you are fit to go onto one of our SQE courses. And as our unrivaled pass rates will show, that has shown that it is the right way to do things, and you can't do the SQE on the cheap, because as we know, the pass rates are very low for SQE1. So our three candidates here have done very well to pass first time for SQE1. Right, let's now talk about SQE1. We said there were 2 parts to SQE1, and this is where we can bring in our 3 students. I'm going to show the fact that there are 2 papers here, paper 1 and paper 2, FLK1 and FLK2. That stands for functioning legal knowledge. These are the 2 papers that you sit, and there are basically 2 different sets of modules that you need to be familiar with for SQE1 that you're going to be assessed on in these multiple choice papers. The first set of subjects you get tested on are the ones in blue here. Farouk, do you just want to sort of summarize where you first came across these in your academic journey?
Yeah, so for me, I started university, a law course that was in 2021. So I started off with my first four modules being the seven essential modules for a qualifying law degree. So contract and tort, criminal law, these kind of modules are already, for me at least, I saw in my first year of university. That's, I guess, the earliest I saw. So for me, sitting now in January is about 3 or 4 years ago.
Absolutely. So typically, anybody with an LLB, a law degree, will have done all of these subjects as part of their LLB, and anyone who does a law conversion course, a proper one, will have covered all of these subjects as well in their previous studies. And that's what we require for anybody who embarks on an SQE1 preparation course. But then there are these other subjects, these new subjects that students get to grips with, and this is what we teach on our SQE1 preparation course. And it's the approach by most providers as well. But you need to be familiar with all these subjects as you sit SQE1. And it's really interesting to note that that there are different um, students perform very differently in these two different sets of areas: the stuff they studied before and the stuff that they're taught as new on an SQE preparation course. Just before we discuss maybe each of your experiences of SQE1, um, how did you each of you feel the preparation for the exam was for you in relation to the underlying law that you already had? Maybe if I could start with Maria, all those subjects you picked up in your previous studies, how did you feel in terms of preparation for the assessment to be retested in these?
Yeah, so I didn't realize that you require all this information from your undergrad as much as the new modules that you learn at BPP. So once I did some practice exams, I understood that I have to go back and revise all of them. Thankfully, BPP has books for each of those modules, so that was very helpful. You don't have to go back and find your notes from your undergrad, but you can use the books BPP provides. So that was very useful. But I tried to just go through all the information, refresh my memory. That was easier than the new content you had to learn because you've heard it before, and you've even if you didn't do it in the last few months, you can still remember a lot once you refresh it from your undergraduate.
So there's lots of stuff for the underlying law that you need to get back to grips with, and plus all this new stuff, the subjects in black. Let's start off with Rebecca and find out from you, in your terms of your journey. You obviously passed SQE1, as you said. What did your transcripts show that were your better performing subjects in SQE1? Do you remember?
Yeah, to be very honest, because I said that I work at a high street firm, I had knowledge about disputes and property right from the beginning because I started work when I was in my second year of undergrad. And because I do disputes in properties, so I had that, and that was two of my strong subjects that actually reflected in the transcripts. The one subject, though, I really felt was really tough for me was wills and disputes. Wills and administration of estates. Even though I worked a bit on it, it was a bit difficult to grasp because of the numbers and stuff, all the calculations that we had to make in that.
Is there quite a lot of maths involved there? Hillary, you teach that subject. Is there tax maths involved there?
Yes, sorry, Rebecca, I'm disappointed. No, that you didn't enjoy it because obviously, as Johnny has indicated, I teach it and I get a lot of pleasure from teaching it. But yeah, you're right, Rebecca. There are calculations that you have to do. So you have to understand inheritance tax and be able to apply it. And we do teach it. You know, we have 3 workshops that cover inheritance tax, and there's a lot of support with students. You know, we give them an awful lot of practice, but I do appreciate, and through my teaching experience, I know that some people find the numbers element slightly more tricky than others. But yeah, I tend to find, if it's okay for me to say, Johnny, I do tend to find that a lot of students, although it's not an area that they're going to go into practice, that area of private client work, they do tend to enjoy wills and the administration of estates.
Yeah, I think it's something that people can relate to. But the maths thing, I would echo that. I like maths, but I've taught for many years, like Hilary, and I know a large proportion of law students consciously chose to become lawyers rather than accountants because the maths thing wasn't something they felt naturally comfortable at. But unfortunately, there is a little bit of maths involved, and therefore, if people do find numbers a bit more trickier than other subjects, then yes, a subject like wills might be tricky, as indeed might some parts of business law, I suppose. But Farouk, I seem to remember business law you quite enjoyed, didn't you?
Yeah, I do have a, I guess, a economics background from way back in A levels, but that, I guess, that interest is allow me to actually do well in business law and practice. It just made sense to me in the sense that I understood why companies were structured in that way, why shareholders had certain rights, those kind of things. I guess having an interest does definitely help, and it was, I think, my second highest practical module. My first was actually Wales, Hillary, so I did enjoy Wales, even though I don't think I'll be practicing in it. I did definitely enjoy it. So don't get me wrong. There was obviously maths involved in both obviously business law and obviously Wales. But I think with obviously BPP and obviously as Hillary mentioned the 3 workshops, I remember having to just smash out loads of inheritance tax questions, and I got sick of them. But in the end, it did definitely help in the exam, because obviously they could come up. So yeah, definitely.
Cool. Which area, Farouk, did you find most challenging in a SQE one?
Personally, it would have been property and equity, but surprisingly, I thought equity. Sorry, from equity, I actually scored quite well on that, just because I made sure to go over it again and again and again, because I just wanted to understand the different type of trusts, what can like get disregard a trust, for instance. But property in itself, the amount of registers that you had to learn about and the different aspects on obviously when completion happens and what the consequences are, and obviously knowing that for not just a freehold but a leasehold as well. For me personally, I think that was a bit challenging. I think I still passed overall in all my subjects, so it wasn't an area that I'm like concerned about. But definitely, it was challenging, because there are procedures that you have to be aware of, and you can't just give like a general overview of that procedure. It has to be to the point, and I think that's where BPP shines. It gives you so much information that you will remember in the exam.
Of course, and thank you. These are all multiple choice questions, so um, the processing of the information you get, which is quite succinct, really, can be quite challenging to unpack quite a complex fact pattern just written out in a few paragraphs. Let's go over to Maria now, and maybe if you could reflect on your SQE1 journey. Let me know which areas you found more complex, more challenging according to your transcript, and which ones you did better at, and why you think that was the case.
I have to agree with Farouk here. Property was the most challenging part for me as well. Um, I think it's the same thing about having to remember all the registers, all the procedures for both freehold and leasehold. So that was pretty challenging, but I enjoyed trusts, which I didn't think in advance that I would, but I enjoyed wills and estates, and this area of law a lot, as well as business law. So I think you learn where your strengths and weaknesses are throughout this journey. Before that, you might not know exactly what you want to go into after you graduate from your bachelor's or if you do a conversion. But I think after doing all this for the SQE, you get a bit of insight into the practice modules. And that way you also know what you want to do or what you are interested in more. Yes.
Thank you. And Hilary, all three of our students would have used our software called BPP Adapt, which helps them to identify their stronger and weaker areas. How does that help them on their journey?
So through BPP Adapt, we have you get the opportunity to practice multiple choice questions, those single best answer questions that are, fundamental to passing the SQE SQE1 assessment. So if you so there is an opportunity at every stage to keep practicing. We teach, we cover a lot of multiple choice questions during our teaching sessions in our workshops, and it's really focusing on, it's not just focusing on getting the correct answer, but actually understanding why that answer is correct, and importantly why the others are incorrect. And it's building up this wealth of knowledge and understanding, that so that when you go, what we aim as tutors, and I'm sure Johnny you'll agree, so the aim is that, you know, when you come to sit the exam, when you come to sit SQE1, you are looking for the correct answer. And if you don't mind, Johnny, I just wanted to address a couple of questions that have come in. You know,
Sure.
as soon as we mention numbers, people, you know, they're very Marmite. Some people go, "Oh, that's fine, I don't mind numbers," and other people go, "Gosh, they terrify me." Um, Constantina, you know, can you still pass and ignore the number focused questions? We would never advise you to ignore any questions. However, your time is finite and you must focus on, you must focus your preparation. And obviously, I'd ask the panelists to, you know, for their comments on this as well, but you must focus your time effectively. So if you're spending hours and hours worrying about the numbers questions, are you using your time efficiently? That's what I would say. But I would never recommend anybody not. I'd never recommend anybody to ignore the questions. And Erin, you do have a calculator in the assessment.
It's an electronic calculator that you have on screen. You can't bring in anything yourself, a calculator or pen or paper, but that you're supplied with the stationery to help you scribble notes, or at least in the SQE1, a little whiteboard and marker pen. Did you guys use that, by the way, in the exam? Um, the little whiteboard and marker pen, or any of you?
Yeah, I think it's not really a whiteboard and pen. I'll be honest, Johnny.
Yeah.
It's like a laminated piece of, like maths book paper. It's literally that, and a pen that doesn't rub out for some reason. You have to give it back to them, and then they rub it out. So you have limited like resources in terms of that. So yeah, I definitely did use it for the calculations. That did come up, and there is an on-screen calculator. But again, that does eat into your time, like Hillary said. You have finite time. You have to make it is a strategy in itself, timing yourself.
Absolutely. And there's no negative marking. So we'd always say, have a go at a question, and you can always flag ones that you're not sure about. And if you've got time at the end, you can go back to them and spend more time if that's a good use of what remaining time you've got left. So there's all sorts of strategies that will teach you in terms of how to approach those questions. Okay, now we're still going to deal with SQE1 now, but I wanted to give you a little bit of data, folks, in terms of, well, we've heard the anecdotal experience of Maria, Rebecca, and Farouk here in terms of what subjects they were stronger at and what they were weaker at. Well, what does it say in the SRA's data? And I did some analysis. I run a YouTube channel called SQE TV. It's got nothing to do with BPP, but it helps support people on the rescue journeys, and do check it out. And what I did as part of my research is I looked at the exam actually that all three students on this session actually looked at, and looked at the performance of those students who were what we would call mid-quintile. These were the students who were right in the middle of the pack in terms of their performance. So just above, just below the pass mark, and in the middle as well. And it'd be interesting to know if you on the chat were just to let us know which subjects do you think students as a whole did better at. And be interesting to know. Just put suggestions in the chat which subjects you think students did better at overall. You've heard different views from the personal experiences from Rebecca, Maria, and Farouk. But what do you think students generally do better at? Just stick a note on the screen, on the chat. So remember, there's all those black letter law areas from your law degree or conversion course, like contract, tort, trust, land, and then there's the new subjects like. So what do they do best at? So Katrina and Mike think tort and contract, and ethics, tort and criminal. Juliet says tort, criminal, contract, criminal practice. Criminal. Well, there's criminal law and there's criminal practice. So when you say criminal, perhaps you could just distinguish between the two. Fahad says tort, criminal, and ethics. Good stuff. Really interesting comments that are coming up here. Let me show you, and this is just the performance of those middling students, not the students who were in the top quintile, the top 20%, and not those who clearly failed, but those who were around about the pass mark and just over mostly. And so here we are. Here is the easiest subjects. Before I reveal this, maybe ask our panel. Rebecca, any idea what subject students did best at overall?
Uh, Maybe I think contract and land law.
Okay, Maria, any idea?
I think it's generally the underlying law.
Okay, Farouk?
Yeah, I'd agree with Maria. And ethics as well, so the underlying law and the ethics section.
Right stuff. Yeah, all three of you are right on the money there. So the subjects that students found the easiest, the top two subjects were on the two FLK papers. The top two subjects were ethics. Now, that isn't a subject that itself is generally taught as a standalone module, but it crops up as a pervasive subject in all the practice areas. I'd be interested to know why you think those questions were relatively straightforward for most students. And was that your experience? Rebecca, what was your experience?
I think I would agree because ethics is more where you use your common day-to-day experiences and stuff, and you could answer those questions. And you've heard that if you're like keeping up with commercial awareness and stuff, you heard what the law firms are doing, what businesses are doing, and you know what would be what you could answer to those questions. I think that's the reason, maybe.
Yeah, sure. Maria, can you add anything?
Yeah, I think, as Rebecca said, a lot of it is just sometimes common sense. It's not a lot of content. So if you go through all the content and understand it, then there's not much studying you need to do in terms of this area.
Yeah, I think so. I think it deals with things like conflicts of interest, and a question is going to be a really obvious question about conflicts of interest. And there's not much you can ask about conflicts of interest, and the fact pattern will jump out at you one way or the other, or when it's dealing with things like disclosure or confidentiality. These duties are fairly straightforward concepts to understand, as long as you understand what the code of conduct says in relation to them, amongst other things. So ethics, top of the shop, and absolutely right, guys. Tort, contracts, and criminal liability were amongst the easiest subjects. And remember, these are for the middling students, those who are around about the middle 20% of all those who took the exam. These students generally scored over 300 out of 500 in terms of a mark for those subjects, which means that they would have passed those subjects overall. You don't have to pass every module that comes up in the exam, as long as you overall pass the each of the papers. But generally speaking, these students were passing these modules. What about the subjects, the more middling subjects? Farouk, any idea?
I would say probably like land, equity, and maybe actually not business, but because I know that people can find that a bit technical. So yeah, we'll go with land and equity.
Let's have a look here. Well, pretty much on the spot. So equity is trusts, that's and land law, and there's also the English legal system. Um, and when you look at all of these subjects, what do they all have in common, panel? Well, Hilary, you can tell me. What do they all have in common?
They're all the underlying law subjects. They are all the subjects that are not the practice areas that we teach for on our SQE1 preparation course. So they're either the subjects that you've done, they're the subjects that you've done either at undergraduate level, like Farouk, or they are or you've studied them on the conversion course. So that's what they have in common. Apart from ethics,
Yeah, apart from
ethics. Well, you may
yeah,
have done that. You may have done that at undergraduate. Yeah.
but I think the panel's point that ethics is common sense, and therefore, once you've learnt the basic principles, it's fairly easy to get to the right answer, which is generally what students are doing. Um, Does anyone have a theory why students are performing better in these subjects? Bearing in mind, we don't reteach them. Anyone on the panel have an idea why you guys might do better, Farouk?
Yeah, I'll go. essentially for me at least, my theory is for myself that obviously I've been exposed to it multiple times throughout my undergraduate degree, and then obviously before actually sitting the exam 6 months beforehand, I looked at the specification, and it was in, I think, almost like black letters in bold saying it's going to be accounting for about 50% of your actual pass mark, the overall marks, and that I guess just highlights how important it is essentially. So I did place a lot of importance on that, and I've already had obviously loads of exposures. For instance, I studied dispute resolution at university, and I would have gone through tort and contract again. So it's just having multiple exposures of it before actually sitting the exam.
Yeah, I think so. And having learnt these subjects, even some of them, many people would have learnt some of these subjects 2, 3 years ago, particularly things like contracts, which is normally studied in the first year of a law degree. Notwithstanding that, it's had time to ruminate, and revising something that's already there is much easier than studying something from scratch, like the subjects the students find the most challenging, which we can see here. Ninth and 10th are criminal law and wills and intestacy. And when we say criminal law and practice as opposed to criminal liability, so this is the practice element of crime. And then the subjects that were the least popular practice subjects were property dispute resolution and business and legal services, which is something that is covered as part of very much as part of a law degree or conversion course. Students find that quite challenging, but generally speaking, it's the practice-based stuff that students find more challenging. And looking at it on the other way round, Hilary, any sort of ideas why that's more challenging for candidates?
I think it kind of builds on Farouk's point that if you have done a law degree, then you've got that deeper learning. If you're studying with us on a full-time basis, if you're doing your SQE1 preparation course on a full-time basis, we start teaching at the beginning of September, and we finish teaching, 5 meaty practice areas in 3 months. And we're not we cover things in a lot of depth, don't we, Johnny?
Yeah,
We our courses are really well designed, and a lot of thought has gone into them to make sure that we cover the syllabus. But maybe it's because they're you if you're sitting in the January assessments, you're studying those 5 big practice areas from September to from September, so sort of like 4 months of really intensive study if you're doing it on a full-time basis.
yeah, and therefore inevitably there's less time for you to ruminate on it, test your knowledge. Whereas, as people are saying in the chat, it's already in, Charlene's point, it's already in people's undergraduate, in their memory from their undergraduate degree or their conversion course, and it's just a question of rebooting that knowledge. And I think some people have made the point that actually the depth of knowledge that's tested on the SQE, even though notionally it's as a day one qualified solicitor, because of the nature of the multiple choice questions, sometimes they aren't as challenging as some aspects of a level 6 part of a law degree or conversion course. So, go on, Hilary.
I was also going to say, and the reality is in practice you keep learning, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah, exactly. And we keep learning and getting better at what we know already. And
Yeah.
then inevitably, once we've got and revised some of the basics of that letter law, that underlying law, um, you're way ahead of where you're going to be for those practice-based subjects where you're just getting to grips with some of the principles where it's all very new, just a few months before the exam. Good. So that gave you an insight into SQE1. We're going to do something now similar for SQE2. But just before we do, in terms of the subjects that you found the most challenging, I just want to go through each of the 3 students. How did you deal with the preparation for SQE1, knowing, because BPP Adapt would have identified for you and told you which areas you need to focus on because you're not as good at. How did you get yourself sort of exam ready and confident in those areas you were less confident about? Maria, could we start with you?
Yes, of course. So I actually used the books more than I used Adapt because I just prefer studying with the book. I went through all the books that we had, and then did all the mock exams, all the mock questions that were that BPP provided us with, as well as additional ones, the ones from the SRA, and yeah, and that way I saw what my weaknesses were, and then I went back to the books or to adapt to the specific area, and then I looked again at this content, and when I understood it, I moved forward. So for the practice exams, actually, I did not only look at the questions I got wrong, also at the questions I got right, because sometimes you get something right just because you feel like it's the right answer, but you don't really know why it's the right answer. So it's important to go through all the questions again to understand them, because at the SQE itself, there might be similar questions as the questions you've done before. So it's important to go through all that. I think that helped me a lot for my SQE preparation.
Excellent, excellent. Rebecca, how about you?
I think for me more was adapt, because adapt I think helped me quite understand the matter, and also the VP task that was given us to do after the adapt sessions. That was where I actually used the knowledge learned and put it to real life examples, and then the sessions obviously that we had with our tutors, followed by like the formative assessments that we had with BPP. Those mock exams helped a lot, and plus the SRA exams, discussing them with all the BPP tutors, that as well built the foundation for my preparation at SQ1.
Yeah, of course. The SRA published a number of sample questions for SQE1, 170. A lot of people, me included, say they really should have published at least one full set of papers for each of FLK1 and FLK2. And it's very shocking that a regulator thinks that it's acceptable not to publish any full past paper or sample paper when students are paying such a large fee for the exams. But we'll deal with that issue another time. So it's really interesting there that we've got two lots of experiences between Maria and Rebecca. Maria much preferring getting your hands dirty through textbooks to get to speed with those areas she found more challenging. Rebecca finding the electronic use of the digital platforms we have to support her. Maria, you had your hand up. Was there a particular point you wanted to add?
No, just about the point that that there is no full exam sit on the SRI page. My friend actually also contacted them, and they said that they reuse past questions. That's the reason why they haven't provided us with a full sit, unfortunately. But yeah, I agree with the point that we really need a full exam sit from the SRA side.
Yeah, I've interviewed several members of the SRA from time to time, and they've hidden behind that answer, which isn't acceptable because you can retire questions from an exam and just write new ones. There's no excuse really for not publishing full set of papers. Just write more questions. Everyone's paying a very large fee for each of these exams, and the 66 million quid in the SRA and Kaplan's coffers coming in 2025 alone, you would have thought they could come up with at least one past paper. But hey, let's not worry about that. That's not what we're talking about today. We're talking more about how to improve your performance in those areas you're weaker in and identify what they are. Farouk, what were your weaker subjects again, and how did you design a strategy for getting exam ready on those?
Yeah, so mine was, I think, property practice and to an extent equity. So for equity, I simply, because we obviously were given like physical books, I literally just like read through it from first page to the last page because I understood it that way. It was almost like going through the academic journey once again, and
Yeah.
it made sense for me. For property practice, it was a bit more nuanced because of different moving parts, different procedures that you kind of needed to know. So for that, I made sure I had enough question practice, and I did around, I think, 4,000 MCQs or something overall, not just for property practice. That would have been a bit insane, but um, yeah. So once I had the right or the wrong answer, I'd make sure. I think I made like a table for each subject, and property practice was the one that was like, I guess, the most full on. And then I'd make sure. I think because BPP uses AI as well to like design questions, and I use that. Okay, where did I go wrong? Where did I go right? And then I identified any trends myself, and I was like, okay, this is what I need to focus on. And I think it got me obviously over the line for property practice. So not, I think it worked. Yeah.
Excellent, excellent stuff. Right, well, let's have a look at SQE2 now. And Hilary, if you could just give us an overview of what SQE2 looks like.
Indeed, I can. So SQE2, it's 50% the knowledge, 50% the skills, and there are 16 1/6 papers that you need to do to pass SQE2. So you need to retain the knowledge, and you've also got to develop the skills. And I haven't got my glasses on, so it's a good job I can remember what they are because I can't see the screen terribly well, Johnny. But there are four written skills that students are assessed in across all the different subject areas. So there's case and matter analysis, legal research, legal writing, and legal drafting. So you'll have 12 written papers. So that's 3 of each of those skills in the different practice areas. And then you have the oral skills. So you have advocacy, you have 2 oral assessments in advocacy, one in one in dispute resolution, and one in criminal practice. And then the other oral skill is interviewing and advising. So an awful lot. You have to keep on top of all that knowledge, and it'd be interesting to know how the panel members prepared for it. Obviously, Rebecca, I appreciate you've not done that yet, but Maria and Farouk, who've sat SQE2, how do you keep that knowledge warm and develop and enhance these skills as well?
That's a good question because, as you said, Hilary, half the marks are for the knowledge and half the marks are for demonstrating the relevant skill. So, Maria, how did you keep that underlying knowledge warm that you have to demonstrate in each of these 16 assessments?
So in the beginning, I thought that once I do the practice for the SQE2 skills, I'm still going to engage with the SQE1 areas that I needed for the exam. But then I realized that if I don't revise alongside, it won't work. So I started to use ADAPT at this point. So I mostly used ADAPT for my SQE2 revision, tried to just go to the areas that I felt like I needed to revise. I knew that property practice was one of my weaker areas, so I tried to focus on that because it's also a big part of the exam. So I tried to focus on the areas that I knew that I didn't score as well as others in SQE1, and then just tried to still do the MCQs on ADAPT, and just revise throughout while also trying to practice for SQE2.
Great stuff. Great stuff. I'm going to ask the panel now if they know which, and I've done a similar exercise in relation to an SQ2 exam, not the one you sat, but the one from October 2024, where I took the middle set of candidates and see when it came to each of the tasks, which are all assessed in the context of one of the practice areas, which practice areas students are doing the worst in and the best in. And just to remind the panel, you can be tested on in a business law context, in a dispute resolution context, in a criminal practice context, in a property context, or in a wills and estates context. Any idea which context students are doing better at? Anyone want to suggest? Farouk, any ideas?
I'd say similar to the SQE1, so maybe the worst in terms of the practical modules would be like business, I want to say, in terms of obviously it only comes up in writing, so I'm guessing obviously that paired with a skill can be quite challenging. The easiest I would argue is probably wills, I want to say.
Okay, what about your experience, Maria? What did you find? You said property was your most challenging. What did you find the easiest?
At the SQE, before we sat it, I thought business would be my most challenging and Will's the one that I enjoy most. But at the exam itself, business I find turned out to be one of the more, not easier, but not as challenging as the others. I think it completely depends on what questions you get, what area of the module itself it is. So I thought I would struggle with business most for the SQE2, but in the end, I think I enjoyed that part.
But probably spending more time on that in your prep probably paid dividends, I suppose, and therefore, when it came to it, you probably felt as confident. Rebecca, have you studied any of your SQE2 yet or not?
I've finished studying the SQE2. I've also done the BPP formatives for SQE2.
So
I've,
how are you finding in terms of the subject matters? Which ones are you
um,
finding in an
so as I
SQE2?
said, because I do disputes, I found disputes really easy. Uh, the hardest subject that I still find, sorry Hillary, but it would still be wills and estates. That's one thing that I still have to get and hang on, and how to get everything sorted on that.
Oh, well, I have to be honest. I teach property, so I have to be an apologist for the property team. I think property is very much a Marmite subject. You either love it or you hate it, and I think that comes out sometimes with the students' reactions. But actually, our students do pretty well in all the subjects. But let's have a look to see the October exam, which FLK subjects came out on top. And funnily enough, absolutely right, Farouk, wills was the one that came out on top by far. And then the next two subjects, the next subject just underneath it was dispute resolution. So that sort of echoes Rebecca's experience. But I suppose Rebecca, having done dispute resolution in the work experience you've got, that gives you the confidence to do well in it. But students tend to find that quite um, quite good. Hilary, any reasons as to why you think students tend to be doing well in these two areas in the context of the skills?
Sorry, it's just unmuting. I don't know. I mean, it's always difficult, isn't it, to sort of try and work out why one area is is coming out on top. It could well be that the interest, the human interest. I mean, as you were saying about Maria, that you know who wasn't looking forward to business law and practice, but having done all that additional work around business law, ended up finding it easier. Maybe it's the human element,
Mm,
Um, wills is I think it's a very human subject. Maths aside, I think it's, a lot of people have had some experience of it. So maybe that's why a lot of people find it relatively straightforward.
yeah, and as you say, we can all relate to it because
Mm.
one day we're all going to die, so we should all make a will. And of course, people in older generations to us will have left wills, and at some stage, some of us may be beneficiaries of those wills. So we naturally take an interest in it. Hopefully not very soon, but hopefully in many years' time for you young people in the room. Um, now, the more middling subjects that students found in terms of their SQE2 journey and in the results, the data coming out of the October 24 sit for SQ2 were criminal litigation, and property practice was fourth, and very distant last place was business. That people are finding the business side of SQE2, like SQE1, the most challenging. And again, I think we probably need to ask ourselves, why of all the practice subjects is business the most tricky? I think in Farouk's case, Farouk takes a natural interest in it. So maybe ask Maria and Rebecca where maybe I mean, Maria, you had a better experience with SQ2, but Rebecca, maybe given you're more focused on dispute resolution side of things, why do students, do you think, finding business in a skills base a little bit more challenging? Do you think?
I think it's more because also it involves calculations, and also there are like various resolutions and stuff that you require to remember, and what's passed when, who passes when, and all the technical aspects. And plus the rule, I feel the rule in business as well changes from time to time, and that's where also the knowledge needs to be updated.
Yep, no, I suppose of all the areas, business is probably the one that company law particularly changes more readily than most areas. Certainly, property practice, most of that was written in 1925, well before I even became a law student, folks. So, um, yeah, of course, there is property law, land law that's been passed since 1925, but a lot of property practice is founded in legislation that's now 100 years old. But really interesting that. Now, I'll ask you guys who are watching, when it comes to the various different skills, which ones do you think students find the easiest or the hardest in terms of the marks that are coming up on the SRA's data? So just to remind you what the skills are, there's advocacy, there's interviewing and advising, there's legal drafting, legal writing, there's legal research, and which is the one I've missed out, case and matter analysis. So which of those subjects do you think students find the most challenging? Just to give you those again, advocacy and interviewing, those are the two oral skills. And then there's the written skills, which are legal drafting, legal writing, case and matter analysis, and legal research. And let's just see what comes up on the chat. Which of the various skills do people find the most challenging? So first dibs, we've got Katrina with legal writing. Mike suggesting advocacy or legal research. Any reflections from our panel in terms of what they found? Jerry says interviewing has got to be easy. Well, if you like talking to people and are confident, it is. But if some people find it really difficult, oral assessments, because they've never done one before. Guessing advocacy as perhaps it feels intimidating. Yeah, so that's a lot of people's experience, I think. So there's a whole range of subjects that people are saying that students tend to find more tricky. That's quite interesting. Any suggestions from the panel as to where generally people find particular skill?
I'm interested that nobody said drafting, because I would have thought that would be quite challenging. That legal drafting.
It's interesting that legal drafting and legal writing, people think, oh, I've been writing for years. I can draft a document, I can write a legal letter. Can't be that hard. Turns out it actually can be. Mohammed, there are 16 components for, there are 16 mini assessments for SQE2 to answer your question, but there are 6 different skills that those 16 assessments are assessed on. So that's advocacy, interviewing, those are the oral skills, and the 4 written skills are legal drafting, legal writing, legal research, and case and matter analysis. And Stefania, you're right, it could vary depending on whether people have got any experience. Let's take the journeys of the students before I reveal the answers from the data. Rebecca, what was your skill that you found the most challenging?
I think advocacy for me would be most challenging, because I just like explored advocacy during the workshops at BPP, and before that, I never had any chance to do that. And plus, the timings to deliver the submissions and to make sure that everything is captured within the submissions and it's delivered in a way that the judge understands, that's a bit intimidating, I feel.
Yeah, I think a lot of people find that. You're not alone, certainly. Maria, how about you?
So for me, it was actually legal research. I believe that I'm skilled in researching generally, but the SQE tests you more on, like, they give you a lot of content and you have to find the right information. You first have to identify whether the document you're currently reading has the right information that you need. So I found that most challenging. Sometimes it also depends on what area it is, and in that area what exactly you're looking for. So yeah. And also my second hardest module was legal drafting, because I don't have any work experience in terms of drafting. So I found that a bit challenging, because you first have to learn how these documents look, and then you have to also kind of memorize the way you have to structure it and the right vocabulary and all that. So for me, it was legal research and drafting.
And maybe just bring in Hilary here, because there's been a question in the chat. Can you explain what legal drafting is and also legal writing, and distinguish them, just so that people understand, because they are two completely different skills, although they both involve obviously writing in a particular official legal way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So drafting would be drafting a formal document. So in the area that I teach, it could be drafting a will. So you could be asked, you could be given various clauses, you could be given a draft will and have to insert clauses. So, drafting is a very particular skill. So when you read a document, it reads as a whole. Legal writing is writing an email or a letter to a client, or it could be that you're asked to. You could be asked to write a letter to the client or to your training supervisor. So it's writing about the law. Drafting is a very particular skill. That involves creating a document that is probably going to be is going to be legally binding. In Johnny's area of property law, drafting a contract, or it could be drafting a lease. So it is drafting a legal document that is going to be binding. So it's very much a different skill from legal writing, which is explaining complex legal terms to a client, and that is a very technical skill in itself.
Yeah, just succinctly summarising law. If you're writing to a client in particular in language that they understand, which you'd obviously have to do in an interview orally, but you might have to summarise the advice in an attendance note, which would be one example of the legal writing that you could be assessed on. Farouk, we haven't asked you, which particular skill did you find the most challenging?
For me, it was probably drafting as well. The reason being, there was I think there was about four areas of law it could come up on, and you're obviously not given beforehand which area is going to be in. So just knowing all those different types of documents was just challenging in itself, and I don't think it is even to this day. I don't think it's possible to memorize every single document, and I don't think that's going to happen in practice either. But initially, I thought it would have been advocacy, even though obviously I do have advocacy experience from my undergraduate degree, but I actually enjoyed it a lot more. It was a bit more, I guess, the adrenaline does carry you, I'll be honest. When you're in that hotel room and you have a judge who's played by an actual solicitor just looking you in the eye, you do get carried on. I'm pretty sure it is a high scoring module, I'll be honest.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, let's put you out your misery and tell you which is the what the answer is to the question in terms of which skills students do well in. So, out of all those skills, which students? Well, it was a trick question. Which ones do the students find the most challenging? And the answer is there is absolutely no clear evidence that the students are performing better in one skill rather than another. And therefore, what's really clear is that the students are performing good students are performing better in or what's determining students' overall outcomes is how they perform in the underlying law. So a weak student will perform weakly no matter what skill it is, because of their performance in relation to the underlying law. And I think that lends me and gives me confidence to say that we at BPP and other providers, I'm sure, are able to teach the basics of these skills so people can execute these skills and demonstrate these skills quite well. But what lets students down, or what makes students a good student when they pass the SQE2 exam, is their performance in relating to how they convey the legal position and apply the law in the context of that skill. So, the data is really unclear in terms of which skill students do best in. It's what reflects students' overall ability is not the actual skill itself, which most people manage to do reasonably well at. It's more so the performance on the underlying law. Any reflections on that, Hilary?
Well, I suppose that's it. That speaks for itself, doesn't it? That we can through preparation you can master the skill, but you still need the knowledge and understanding.
And that all goes back to one of the points I mentioned earlier. If you're a non-lawyer, this underlying law we've been talking about is a theme that runs all the way through SQE1. You need all that core underlying law for SQE1. You need it through and carry it through into SQE2 in relation to those 5 practice areas I showed you a moment ago. And what Claire says, it's reassuring as they show you can still pass even if you're obviously nervous. I think that's a real fair point, isn't it, Hilary? A lot of students get nervous, particularly when they've got to do a performance in an oral exam. But this data tells us that actually most students, if they're capable of passing, should be getting at least pass mark in the skill area.
Yeah, absolutely. That having done advocacy in in my role previously, in practice, you are nervous when you go into court, and there's the if you're not nervous going into court, then you're not going to do a good performance. So it's totally understandable that you will have an element of nerves, and as Farouk said, that's when the adrenaline kicks in, and that's when you perform your best. It's about the preparation. It's all about the preparation. If you are properly prepared for these assessments, yes, you will be nervous, but you will get through them and you will do well.
And certainly with face-to-face teaching, or certainly live teaching online, if not face-to-face teaching, live teaching validates that knowledge, particularly for SQE2, where you can get instant feedback. Um, any reflections in terms of your journey, in terms of what supported you on your journey, and maybe helped you pass SQE1, each of you? Maybe start off with Maria. What would you say was the secret to your passing SQE1?
I think it's important to start early, and just constantly, even if it's not a lot of work, just try to go to the workshops, do your preparation. I think BPP helps with that a lot, the system they have set up. But also before the exam, at least like a month before or a month and a half. That's what I did. I locked in. I completely focused on the exam, and I did a lot of practice sits. So a lot of practice sits in the way it's going to be at the exam as well. So I timed myself without any distractions, and I tried to train myself to finish every question in 1 minute, because some questions require more time, for example, the calculation. And when you're trained to answer immediately, you have enough time to answer the questions that require more time as well. So I think that's my biggest tip. Start early, do a lot of practice exams in the way you're also examined at the SQE itself. And yes.
Yeah, where you see a short question, try and get it done in a minute. There are some questions that literally reading it's going to take you a minute before you thought about it, but you're right. A short question you can get through in a minute. I do demonstrate that on my website, actually, on my YouTube channel, which I'm just publishing the link for in the chat. We're clocking around to 5. Just final reflections, just from briefly from Farouk and Rebecca, and then we'll close this part of the session. Farouk, and we'll deal with any other questions in the networking in a moment. Farouk, what was the secret of your success, do you think?
Yeah, I've got two quick ones. I'd say is actually understanding what you're learning about, understanding the concepts. Because when you're in that exam, if you know the concept inside out, you're going to do well. I think the second one would be just thinking like a lawyer. You are making a judgment call at the end of the day. You imagine yourself in your office or whatever making a judgment call on a client's case. It's the same experience, and just having that confidence and saying, okay, this is why I think this is right, and then just moving on. You can't do anything about it. Each question is worth 1 mark. They're all the same value, so just, like, don't dwell on it.
Cool. Finally, Rebecca, last reflection from you.
I think it would be maintaining a schedule and always being consistent with the material that you have, like revising and keeping up to date. And also would be like practicing as much as you can, because not everything that you study actually comes up in the exam. Sometimes there's different things. So practice as much as you can and do everything that you have with you.
Yeah, and we've got lots of materials. Hilary, one parting shot from you, and then we'll close the session.
Yeah,
One top tip.
no, it's interesting because, you and I, Johnny, have held lots of events like this. We've spoken to lots of students and got their feedback. And something that, that I kept hold of, obviously, everything that the panelists have said is reflected in the feedback I've had from students, but also accepting that you can never be properly, you will never feel fully prepared for SQE1, because you just simply don't know what's going to come up. It's a completely different exam regime probably to anything you've ever done before, but provided that you understand what you're learning, which was the point that Farouk made, that you have a schedule that you're sticking to, and that you cannot cram anything at the last minute. You've got to be, you've got to have know what you're going to be learning. So time management is absolutely key, but be prepared to think, I don't know everything for this exam, because that's, you can't, but it's moving on, being confident, moving on, and doing the best that you can.
Sure, and we'll answer some really good questions I can see in the chat. If people could copy and paste their questions, or to go into the networking room, which will be in another place, because there's some really good questions that I want to deal with in a few minutes' time. So thank you so much, all three students. I don't know how many of you are coming to the expo just to deal with any Q&A coming in from the students there, but you're welcome to join us in the expo on the left-hand side of the screen. But could I just welcome back Legal Chic, who I think will give instructions now, Erin will, in terms of what we're doing next.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was a really interesting discussion, and some really great advice at the end there, which I'm sure everyone in the audience will have found really useful. As mentioned at the beginning, do check out our SQE FAQs page to find out more about the SQE. My colleague will post another link to this page in the chat in just a moment. As Johnny has mentioned, the event isn't over yet. We still have an hour of networking with the BPP University Law School team, so make sure you don't go anywhere. For the speakers, please feel free to click on Expo on the left-hand side of your screen to make your way over to the networking. For those in the audience, you'll also need to click on the Expo tab on the left-hand side of your screen. From there, you'll be able to click on the BPP banner to join the networking booth. I would strongly encourage you to share your audio and video if possible, because it really is great to be able to speak to people directly and ask all your burning questions. But thank you everyone for attending this afternoon's session. We really hope you found it useful, and we look forward to seeing you at our events in the future.
Thank you, Erin, and see you in the expo booth, everybody, in a few minutes' time.
See you then.
A lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.